I'm recording. And here we are.
Here we are.
Wow. So everybody give it up for Jean Reidy, our wonderful multi-author, multi award winner. Jean, it's wonderful to have you. And before I forget, because I always forget, I'm Mel Rosenberg. And how many people do you know that can't remember their own names? And I am the host of the Children's Literature Channel of the New Books Network. And
Awesome.
my guest,
I'm so happy to be here.
yes.
Yes.
And so let's start out with your name, because I'm thinking, is your name really Jean Reidy?
It is. It is. So my maiden name is Jean Minoni. I am 100% Italian. And I married this Irish guy, Michael Reidy, R-E-I-D-Y. And his family's from County Cork, so it's a legitimate Irish name, but that's my last name now.
So as a children's writer, how long did it take you to find a guy who had a surname that you were looking for?
Oh gosh, I put it out there, I interviewed, I had them pronounce it. Great question.
I love this already. So usually I interview, I'm going to put us on gallery so everybody can see more of you and less of me. Much better. So usually I have an interview where the author talks about a book that's coming out, but you have a zillion. So let's start with the books that are coming out this year, next year, and then we'll go back to your childhood.
Okay. All right. So this past year, I had, let's see, is it 2 or 3?
Do you want me to help you?
No, I get 12. There you go. I know for sure Sylvie came out this year, and Me and You and a Book Made for Two came out. I get sometimes 2021 and 2022 a little mixed up because some came out.
Okay, so Jean, because this is a real backdrop, you can take the book out from behind you and show it to everybody.
I know. Oh, and a grande. So here we go. I've got Sylvie here. Sylvie came out in July. I'm sorry, Sylvie came out in May. A grande came out in July. And Me and You and a Book Made for Two came out in August. So those are the 3 beauties from this year. Okay, yeah, I'm glad you had me do that.
My pleasure. And Me and You in a Book Made for Two, maybe I got the name right, is the second in a trilogy.
That's right. That's right. So it started with What Would You Do in a Book About You up here. And this came out last year with Joey Chu. And then this is the second. So it's about being with a friend. And then the third comes out next year. Sorry for my reach. The third comes out next year, and it's called A Book About You and All the World Too. So it goes from you to you and a friend to you and all the world. And so it's kind of, in a kid's growing up, their horizons and their world sort of expands. And that's how the series expands. Okay,
so we can decide afterwards which book we're going to focus on. They're all wonderful. And now let's go all the way back to Jean Reidy from the very beginning.
Okay. So if you don't mind, I'm going to go even further back because it's kind of part of my story. So
one second, yeah, as far back as Garibaldi.
Close. I think it's close.
Julius Caesar.
Absolutely. I'm sure there's some ties there. So all 4 of my grandparents and my dad were born in Italy. And the last that came over was my dad and my grandmother in about 1917. And my mom's dad and his brothers started a home delivery dairy business here on the North Shore of Chicago, right in Highland Park, where I grew up. So that's how our family got to Highland Park. And the really cool thing about that history is it seems as though 98% of the Italians in Highland Park and Highwood, the neighboring town, all came from these two little mountain towns in Italy. And so if I wasn't related to these people, to these other Italians, they were certainly good friends and we had a lot in common. And many of them worked at my parents' dairy or at my grandfather's dairy.
Okay, hold on for a second.
Yeah.
Italian people who say my grandparents were from Italy and they don't mention a region or a town, that it usually means they're from Sicily.
No, so we're from Emilia Romagna and the town is Pieve Pelago. So it's up north and west of Florence. And then one of my grandmothers, there was only one grandparent who wasn't from that.
One second. North and west of Florence is Switzerland and the.
It would slightly, just slightly.
Near Torino.
Not quite Torino, near Ferrari, near Modena, those areas.
Okay, never been. Wonderful.
Yeah. Do you know Italy well?
I've been many times, but not to that area.
Beautiful mountain country.
North of Florence, I get lost.
Yeah. It's where all the best food is from. So just remember that. Yeah. But and then one of my mom's mom was from Tuscany. But anyway, so this town of Highland Park, which is on the North Shore of Chicago, is this self-contained community. So we had our grocery store, we had our dairy, we had our butcher. And so you could walk everywhere, including my beautiful local library. And this is a library that's worth Googling. The Highland Park Public Library is this old stone building on a ravine. It's gorgeous. And so I was a reader as a kid. And even though maybe I wasn't a reader like some of my fellow authors that were always reading or always like had their flashlights on in the middle of the night and things like that, I always loved being surrounded by books. It was very comforting to me. That was one of the first places that I could walk to by myself from home. And so that was, this place where I could be independent. Anyway, loved growing up there. And even though I had a lot of friends and relatives and so on, I also was a huge daydreamer. So I'm the youngest of 6. And my mom and dad, my brothers and sisters, always called me a dreamer, and not always the most loving way.
You're the youngest of 6.
I am. Wow. And there's this huge spread. Mm-hmm. So my oldest brother, John, who lives here in the Chicago area, is 18 years older than me.
Wow.
Yeah. So I had this huge imagination. I had imaginary friends. I put on plays. I wrote stories. I wrote poetry. I was inside and out of my own head a lot. So that's pretty much my childhood.
Okay, let's go back because some of the people that I interview write picture books for 5 or 6 year olds, and I think that you're sometimes writing even to the 4 to 6 year olds, and I love it. What were you like as a 4 to 6 year old? Did people read books to you before you could read, or could you read at the age of 4?
I wanted to read at the age of 4. So my mom tells the story that I went to my first day of kindergarten. We had half day in that time. I was so excited to go to school. I couldn't wait. And I came home and I was so mad that I didn't learn how to read. So mad. Yeah, I just, I think back then there were those kids that did read before kindergarten, but I think there were maybe fewer than there are today. I mean, kids today are geniuses. But I loved school. I couldn't wait to read. In terms of people reading to me, you would have thought with all those older brothers and sisters, I would have been read to a lot. But my parents,
I'm guessing
were both very busy with the family business.
They didn't give you
and my siblings were older. What's that?
They didn't give you the time of day.
Don't give me the time of day. That's why I was a dreamer.
Your parents were busy delivering milk, and in between delivering milk, having babies.
That's right. That's right. But you know, they were always very involved. Like my dad came home for lunch, the business was a block away, but that wasn't one of the, even though they read, that wasn't one of the things they did with me. That said, my grandmother grew up with us. So she lived with us and she only spoke Italian and like this broken English. And she would read with me. So I had to pull this down. So this is the book that she read with me most often. And this is my original copy. But I don't know if she could read the words now or what was going on, but we would sit on the couch and we'd look at the pictures and she'd tell me stories about the pictures and we'd laugh and I'd tell her stories and we'd both be reading together. So those were some of my fondest memories of reading.
She probably thought that Dr. Seuss was speaking English, right?
I think so. And this dictionary is like no other dictionary.
I would say for all of the people who don't know English, Dr. Seuss is not the way to start.
Might not be. That's probably why she never learned.
Could be. Nobody told her. That's not really English, Grandma. There's a story there, Jean. There's a story there.
Oh, yeah. There's always a story there.
So when you were a kid, no, you're too young. They didn't deliver there weren't milkmen and these delivery trucks. There were?
Oh, yeah.
With the bottles made of glass?
Glass bottles. Even to our school, we had little glass bottles. I'm old now. Yeah. And you know what? I had milk delivery in Denver, and my son in Pittsburgh has glass bottle milk delivery in Pittsburgh. I mean, you pay a premium for it, but there's something very wonderful about that. And certainly back in the day, it was more common. So we had milk, butter, eggs, yogurt, sometimes like a juice, vitamins, you know, they sold it all. And they would come to the door and
yeah. I listen, I have a story about the milkman, and maybe I'll be able to sell it now. If you wait long enough, I wrote a manuscript about a milkman. And nobody wants it because there's no milkman anymore.
You're freezing a little bit.
I'm saying that I wrote a story about a milkman, but now milkmen are coming back, so maybe I can sell it.
Oh, you know, that's so interesting because years ago, I can't remember if this was a request or my agent came to me with a request. This was now probably, I don't know, 10 years ago or so, that somebody was looking for kind of traditional, historic, I can't remember the words she used, Christmas story. And I wrote a milkman story related to delivery on Christmas Day and what that was like. So, you know, they're going to make a comeback. I think next year milkmen are going to be huge.
I think, well, you are huge. Let's now, so I ask all my interviewees, do you write to the 4, 5, 6-year-old Jean Reidy? Are you at heart a young child?
Probably. I know I hear that tossed around a lot. I think that I was actually thinking about this a lot before I chatted with you today. I think there is a part of me that's that person, but I think there's also a part of me that just loves that person, that age group. I notice when I've got tons of nieces and nephews, I have grandchildren, and when I'm hanging around with them, the ones that I gravitate to are probably the 1 to 5 or 6-year-olds, and they're so darn funny. And getting on their level and talking their talk probably is where I find the most enjoyment. So I don't know if that's the kid inside of me or just the person who loves that kid inside that age group.
I think that it's wonderful if you can. I visited my granddaughter's first grade a few years ago.
Oh, cool, yeah.
And I asked whether I could stay and whether they'd accept me. And one of her friends turned around and said to me, I think you should start off in kindergarten.
That's so classic. Oh my gosh, yes.
And that's coming from a 6-year-old, right?
They're so honest, and yeah, they tell it like it is. I love that.
So I'm going to allow you now to grow up, and then what happened?
So then things took a bit of a detour because so I went to like college prep high school, and in that high school, no exposure to any kind of economics or business classes. It was all the sciences, literature, history, so on, the traditional classes. And my parents were always in business. And so by the time I got done with high school, meanwhile, there was nobody along the way. Writing was not rewarding in grade school and high school. Let's put it that way. I had one fourth grade teacher. We always have that one teacher who is probably the most amazing. She still read aloud to us. She always complimented, what I wrote, but I didn't take it to heart because really nobody else did. And by the time I got out of high school, I was ready to do something different. And the only thing I hadn't studied was business. And so I ended up getting my BBA, my MBA, and I worked in the business world for a while. I worked at Price Waterhouse. I was on Wall Street. I worked for Exxon. And then I loved it. People are always like, oh, is that what you kind of did before you found your heart and soul? I'm like, no, I really loved it. When we moved back from
One said, Jean, hold on. My brother is of that brand of fine people. So what did you do on Wall Street?
So that's also where I got my MBA. I went to
I hope not hedge funds.
No, but there were those people that were on my faculty at the time, because this was in the early 80s. But then I reverse commuted to Exxon, which was out in Florham Park, New Jersey. And my husband was working in the city, and we were only there for a few years before we moved back to Denver. But my goal that whole time was I wanted to teach in a business school. I loved my business professors in undergrad. I wanted to teach accounting. I loved accounting, specifically auditing. And I ended up teaching in the MBA program at University of Colorado for a while. And it was great because I taught in the evenings. I taught in sort of.
Are you making all this up just for the show?
No.
Because you don't have to. It's very weird.
I know.
Kat, it's true.
It's so true.
Keep going.
Yeah. And I had started having my kids. And so actually this worked out really well because my husband had this like busy, crazy job, and I could teach at night when he got home. I taught in sort of one of those non-traditional programs. So I had all of the geologists who were now getting their MBAs, people like that, which was great. It was a great part-time job while I was raising my kids. So it gets weirder though, because right about the time my youngest was 3, I knew I was probably done with my family, but I wanted to always foster kids. So we became foster parents, and we had 4 foster kids, not all at the same time. And that's when I quit teaching. And it was after my last foster kid left. She was a tiny baby. She came to me right from the hospital. She was 5 pounds. And it was a very emotional experience. The whole fostering altogether is a very emotional experience. But when she left, I talked to my sister on the phone and I said, gosh, I don't know what to do with all this emotion. Like, this is crazy. And she said, write about it. You have stories to tell, write about it. And that's when I started. So, but I started writing for magazines and newspapers. I wrote a lot of essays back in the day when publications actually printed essays. So Family Fun, Parents Magazine, the Denver Post, Christian Science Monitor, all those places. Anybody who would buy my essays.
No, but how did you break into that? Because that's a very good start. And, you wake up in the morning and you send really.
So you start telling those stories, and you
just wrote and you didn't know people, and you just sent them off to
right?
magazines?
And Sazzies. Do you remember Sazzies? Do you know what a Sazzie is, Mel?
No. Self-addressed.
A self-addressed stamped envelope, and you were doing it all through the mail, and yeah. It was probably just a few years later that I was able to query. I got to know some of the editors at a magazine called Family Fun. It was a Disney publication. And I could start querying them directly because I had written several things for them by then. And so I started writing about travel, family travel, and crafty family things. But most of the time I was writing essays. And that brought me to my critique group, where I met the first person in my life who was writing for children. And she was just getting ready to publish her middle grade novel. And this was at a time when my kids were reading, they were the ages, everything from picture books to middle grade. And I was falling in love with kid lit all over again because of my kids. And here's this woman in my critique group who's publishing a middle grade novel. And I thought, wow, I want to be part of that. That is intriguing to me. I think I have stories to tell.
Wow. I'm just going to let you keep going, and I just have this idiotic grin on my face while I listen to you, because when I asked for your biography, you didn't really send it to me, and now I understand why.
I didn't send you. I thought I did.
No, you did.
Really
you did.
Short.
You did. Yeah, but you didn't keep all the juicy stuff is out.
Well, can you imagine? It would be decades long. Anyway, I joined this critique group. They were ladies I was with for 20 years. I was writing essays at the time that we were writing for magazines and newspapers, and one woman was writing books mostly about technology. And then there was my friend Mary, who was writing for children, and we brought on another woman who was writing picture books. And people would come and go. And I started writing this middle grade novel, and it went through critique. And actually I have like 5 middle grade novels resting.
Really?
Yes, 4 or 5. I'd have to count. They're resting. I think they're pretty darn good, but thought so. They need work. But I wrote this middle grade novel, and how did this work? Oh, I started going to some conferences, and I went to this one sort of picture book or children's writing boot camp or something like that. And in this conference, I wrote a picture book, and I brought it, entered in a contest at this other conference, and it won like the top award. So now I think I'm golden, because this got me like an interview with an agent, an interview with an editor, blah, blah, blah. And I'm done, right? Here it is. It's like 3,000 words long. But the people who judged liked the voice, and the editor and agent actually were saying, we think you should write middle grade. And it's like, okay. I queried with that picture book, that lengthy picture book. I think I got it down to maybe 1,500 words, something like that, and got some interest. And I had an agent, a big New York agency, don't want to mention any names, but an agent that wanted to go out with it immediately and see how it went. And I started asking some questions like, what about a contract? Tell me more about you. I felt like signing on with an agent was an important relationship. And that person didn't like those questions. And we parted ways before we even joined together. So then it was a few years, and I submitted my middle grade novel to Erin Murphy, who was coming to our SCBWI Rocky Mountain Conference. And she liked it, but it was taking time for her to get through it. Was taking time because she had other clients and she was busy. You know how long it takes when you're not in yet. And right about that same time, I wrote this little picture book. It was too purpley. It was 47 words. I brought it to my critique group. And my question for my critique group was, do I need a narrative surrounding this? Like, this is a universal problem with kids in their clothes. What else do I need? Do I need it to be more about a character? And they started giving me ideas. And one woman said, Jean, I think you should leave it alone. And I was reading one of these SCBWI bulletins, and in there was a little tiny blurb that said that Jill Davis, an editor, extraordinary editor, was leaving her post, I think it was at Viking, and she was moving to Bloomsbury to start or to start her list with books for the very, very young. I was like, okay. And Bloomsbury was open to submissions. I sent it to Jill and she pulled it out of the slush, or her assistant did. So then she said, so she writes back and her assistant says, Jill loves this. She wants to know, it's rather slight, 47 words. She said, she wants to know if you have something to go with it. So what did I say? Yes, even though I didn't. I got busy and I wrote several different versions. So one of them was too pickly. I wrote one, I think it was about hairdos or something. I'm trying to remember some of the other ones. Something that looked a little bit like Too Princessy, but was more about stories. And she sent me this adorable little illustration of Genevieve LaLoops, who is the illustrator of that series. And Genevieve is a fabric designer. And she's like, I want to pair you with this woman so badly. She paired us. She was getting ready to buy it. I wrote back to Erin Murphy and said, I think I'm ready to go to contract with this book. I would love for you to represent me. How does this work? So it was a little bit of a back and forth. And I actually had queries out with a few other agents. And so while we were getting ready to go to contract, I had phone calls with a few other agents about this and my other work. And I kind of knew that I always wanted Erin though. And so signed with her. And then the contract came in. And then we started this long, beautiful relationship together and have sold quite a few books together. So
incredible. So no, I'm in awe of your success and your life path towards your success. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But you have Too Purpley around. I see it right behind your shoulder.
Yeah.
Can you read a bit of it? And because it's on the other side, Jean.
Oh, thanks.
Everybody else can see it except you.
I know. So it's really
too invisible.
Oh, I'm trying to think. I don't have. That's actually a good idea. If this were still a series, I might consider it. So I love this. So Too Purpley. This series, I dedicated it to those nieces and nephews that sort of inspired the different topics. And this started with my niece, Sarah. So the dedication is to Sarah, whose jammies were always too scratchy. But once I started talking to people, other parents about this, I realized that, all kids have these issues. But it starts out actually on the title page. So this is one of my autographing flops. Like, this is a hazard. That if you sign it to the wrong kid, you just bought your own book. Okay, so it starts out on this title page, adorable Genevieve LaLoops illustrations. No, not these clothes. too purpley, too tickly, too puckery, too prickly. And it kind of goes on from there. And you get to the end page. There's sort of a little bit of a climax with a page turn, like too slippery, too spotty, too zippery, too polka dotty. It just ends so comfy, just right. And so it's a very simple story. But I had, during this one school visit, it was so cute. I love when kids talk to me. Like, my favorite part is the question and answer, but I don't want to answer the questions. I just want to hear their stories because they're a riot. And this one little boy says to me, you know what, Jean Reidy? I think she missed the bus. You know what? I think you're right. He said, she spent too much time with her clothes and missed the bus. I love their observations. There was another kid who told me that that the firewoman in Time Out for Monsters, he says, I know a secret. I said, what's that? He said, I think the firewoman, right here, I think the firewoman is you. Secret. But anyway, oh my gosh, it's a riot.
It is me. So yeah, there's nothing like reader response when the readers are 5-year-olds.
Oh my gosh, it's the best.
So I love these kind of interviews because everything that I think you've now scrambled. Because and this is maybe now we're going to wax philosophical for a few minutes, because the people that I get to interview, like you,
you're freezing up again a little bit, so I'm not hearing what you're saying, but hopefully you'll come
okay
back.
It's not that important, but I'll try again. When I interview people, can you hear me yet? We'll wait another second. I can see myself, but I'm not sure that it's working.
I can hear you now.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm going to open the door a bit.
Okay.
Let more internet into the room. That's a superstition. Can you hear me now? Oy vey. Tell me when you can hear me. This is a problem. Do we have a solution? Jean Reidy, please come back. Tel Aviv calling Chicago. Okay, we're still here. Can you hear me?
Yay, you're back. I can.
Okay. That's
Sorry
wonderful.
about that. I hope it's not on my end.
It's my fault. I'm not paying the internet enough money, I think. Something like that. Or maybe the distance from Israel to Chicago.
That's it.
There's some anti-Semite in the middle of the Atlantic chopping the cords as we speak. So what I wanted to say when we were interrupted is that sometimes I'm speaking to a wonderful author like yourself, and they tell me all the things that I need to know according to my theories and what everybody else says. And then somebody like you comes along, and you upset the apple cart. Now, why does it? Well, because this is what happens. Like you're almost a scientist with your background. When you talk about success stories that are like yours, 1 in 100,000 authors will have the success that you have. Multiple prize-winning books with leading publishers. It's very rare. And then you want to say, oh, if I could be like Jean Reidy, then I would also, be famous. So, but the thing is, okay, you have to be the youngest of 6. You have to, and then you have to study auditing and become a professor of business. And it doesn't work. And then you have to write for Parents Magazine and get in the slush pile, and then write several unsuccessful middle grade magazines, and then you become world famous. So that intrigues me. So I hope that you recognize that you are extremely successful. You've frozen on me again. And we want to teach everybody, including like writers like me, who have stories about spiders and turtles and being yourself and writing your own book and what have you. But we're not where you are. And we want to someday aspire to be where you are. And sometimes the lessons are very peculiar because, I'm not going to go now work on Wall Street, for example, or
nor would I recommend it.
or have Italian grandparents. Why am I mentioning this? I just remembered. Because when I read Too Purpley, I didn't know it was your first breakthrough book. And I said, 47 words. Nobody who didn't, if you weren't famous, nobody would buy that book. Not because it isn't a great book, but you're pitching a picture book with 47 words. What chutzpah? You're not even Jewish. Most writers, they write and they say, oh, how can you write a picture book in less than 500 words? Of course you can. But if you're a novice, it's going to be like 498 words. And you, as a so-called novice, are submitting to Jill Davis, a manuscript with 47 words.
I know. It was scary. But, it's at some point, you also have to think, what have you got to lose? But, to go back to your point of the path, and I think in some cases the path is very important, because that's where people's heart and soul lie. And there are parts of my path that are very important. Some are probably irrelevant, right? You asked me what it looked like, that's what it looked like. And you could almost scratch out those pieces. They're part of who I am today. And honestly, Mel, sometimes I think my business background helps in this business because I can stand back and view it objectively. I don't write my books for the business end of it. It doesn't come into play then. But you can believe when I get a rejection or a royalty statement or something like that, I can understand the business end of it. At least I think I can. But I think if you had to look at what goes into publishing a book and what goes into somebody publishing their first book, and I tell this to students also, that story not only has to take up residence in your head, it has to take up residence in your heart. And so there has to be something for you personally that you so love, not because you think, I love it because it's going to be published, but every time I look at Too Purpley, I'm like, oh my gosh, those kids. And I think that's how I choose my story ideas to write about. I have a million story ideas every day, but the ones that I write about are the ones that can't leave my heart alone. And then I just have to hope that somebody else is on board with that same universal feeling, whatever it is. And I can even see it with the works that I'm working on right now. I do Tara Lazar's Story Storm too. I just did it for the first time last year, first time. All these people get on, and they're like, I've been doing it for years. I didn't think I needed to, kind of like you, because I was like, I have plenty of stories. I have drawers of stories. I can't do any more or ideas. I have tons, and I don't have time to write them. So why would I need more ideas? And last year I did it, and I came up with 3 or 4 that I wanted to write about immediately. I just submitted one to Aaron at the beginning of this week, and I'm doing it again this year. You put up those antennae and you start telling yourself you're going to come up with ideas, and you do.
That's crazy, because I interviewed Tara Lazar, I don't know, 3 weeks ago. And I said, you know what? I teach people how to come up with ideas. I'm an inventor. I don't need your story storm, but I'm going to do you a favor and I'll sign up this year. Wow, it works. And then I don't know if you're listening to me because you're frozen, that maybe everybody else is. So then about a week ago or 2 weeks ago, I interviewed Tammy Sauer. And it turns out that one of her greatest, most famous books, I think Wordy Birdie, was born in Storystone. So I have no idea if you're listening or if anybody else is listening. You have this smile on your face, but it's not going anywhere. So I have to wonder whether I'm alone again. Hi, Jean, you're back.
Hey, Mel, do you want me to move closer to my router? Do you think?
Do you think you can?
It's going to be a different background.
No, I want your books. Eventually, okay. Listen, we're not going to be able to do this whole interview in one shot anyway. So this is going to be part one.
Okay.
And if you had a good time, like I saw you for a minute, I can tell you how happy you are because you were like this.
Yeah.
And you weren't moving at all. And I said, oh, that's a very happy interviewee.
I was frozen, right?
Yeah. But if you're having a good time, we can continue because there's lots to talk about. You have a million very successful books. So while I have the internet, I want to ask you, which book is the most successful and which one is the most disappointing that you thought it would be successful and it's less successful?
Cucumbers.
Oh. Well, because cucumbers become pickles, you know.
Yeah. So it kind of depends on how you look at success, but Too Purpley, wildly successful. Truman, wildly successful. And some have still yet to be seen, right? And then like they're all, you know, you have to say this. You have to say you love all your books, but you love them all for very different reasons, and here's why. You know, and some of them have been more successful in other countries than they have here, which is always really interesting.
For example?
So far, let me take a look. I would say Group Hug has, I hate this word more successful and less successful. That's why I really want to answer this question because it really kind of depends. But Group Hug was picked up also by a company in the UK for subrights. And so they printed it in the UK and they came out with it.
Frozen again. Frozen again. This is not working. Hi, we're back again.
I don't know where
This is the most truncated interview in history. I have no idea if. Can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay. We can always have another interview because I'm having so much fun.
Oh, good.
So after you demurred answering my question, you're answering my question. So just go ahead and answer it. It's not about the finances. You were talking about a book that the Group Hug that was picked up in Britain.
Yeah. So Group Hug, I don't know how far I got, but it actually came out in the UK before it came out in the US. It was delayed in the US.
You're like the Beatles. You're like the Beatles.
I wish. I love the Beatles. That's like the highest compliment you could pay me. So it came out there, and they got a head start because in the US, publication was delayed because of the whole supply chain issue. So it was supposed to be out at the end, like in November of 2021 for Valentine's Day of 2022. That's kind of how things work. Well, instead it came out right before Christmas. And so it kind of got lost in the Christmas kerfuffle. But what I love is it's starting, it's kind of like it's having its year this year instead. And so it's appeared on a lot of blogs for this Valentine's Day, and people, like, word of mouth has spread. But over in the UK, it's like they're a year ahead of us with this book, even though I think in the UK it was maybe a paperback, and here it's a hardcover. And that book, oh my gosh, I got to show you this. This is so cute. So group hug, here's the cover. This has one of these book jackets where when you open it up, look at this. It's a poster, which is so adorable. So I love those kinds of surprises. Anyway, yeah. Does that answer that question?
Yes, a group hug. Yes, group hug. I love it because I think it's fine to hug. And, you know, there's been a movement the past couple of years of writing, without naming any names, of children's books where hugging is verboten. Kids that don't want to hug, and that's okay. Yeah. But you have.
I like those books too. I like those books too. I don't.
Yeah, and I might end up interviewing those people, so I don't want to, you know, deride books against hugging. But I'm a hugging proponent myself. And then you have that wonderful book on the with the grandpa hug on the cover.
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh, Grande. Oh my God, yes. I mean, Samantha Cotterill's art. She did something cool with the book jacket too. You got to look at this, because if you don't have the hard copy of the book, if you go, not the book jacket, the case cover. So when you lift it off, you get her hand setting one of the 3D chairs, so you can get the perspective of the size of her hand with one of the amazing sets, because she does this 3D art, and she puts it all together and then she photographs it. Like the work that goes into this beautiful book.
Okay, let's hope we come back soon. Here I am by myself. How sad. I'm still recording. Maybe I should sing a Beatles tune. What would be a good Beatles song here? Oy vey, oy vey, oy vey. When technology doesn't work, how sad I am, how happy I will be. Maybe there's a story here. Okay, well, I don't know. What do you think, Anton van Leeuwenhoek? This is a little difficult. Okay, let's see what's happening here. Okay, I'm connected. Hmm. Hmm. Okay. Yeah, I might as well stop recording here.